unless we do not develop our grassroots of sports culture, whether it's in schools or in the Maidans or on the beaches of Oman, unless we don't promote this vehemently from family, school, establishments, we're not going to be able to get into the real business of sports.
Tejarah Talks.
Hi, I'm Ali Al-Hosni and welcome to Tejarah Talks, Oman's premier business podcast. From green manufacturing to Gen Z and the creative industries, we explore the exciting trends, game-changing ideas shaping our business community. Today, we are joined by His Excellency Pankaj Khimji, Foreign Trade and International Cooperation Advisor at the Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Investment Promotion, and Joe Rafferty, Events Director at Oman Sail. Thank you for joining us.
Over the past 10 years, Nodal has worked on some of Oman's most important digital transformation projects, including the Invest Easy portal and the Oman e-Census 2020. We've also been committed to developing local entrepreneurial talent through our Oman Talent Hub. With digital transformation playing a key role in Oman's Vision 2040, we're excited to see what's next for the country and how we can continue to be part of its journey.
Before we jump into our discussion, I would like our listeners to know a little bit more about both of you. So let's start with Joe. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? How did you get into sports? And how are you finding Oman so far?
Sure. Well, a lot to cover. Thanks, Alia. So I think sport has been in my life, well, from as long as I can remember. I think my first memories go back to maybe the World Cup in '86 or the Seoul Olympics in '88, and I think I was bitten by the bug. And I think I've been quite lucky to have developed a career in what has always been my passion. Nice. I have been in Oman coming up on 7 years, and it's, I think, fair to say it's stolen a big chunk of my heart and my family's heart.
That's great to hear.
You know, my son will tell you very proudly that he's Omani. You know, when we watched the Olympic Games last year, he didn't cheer for the Irish rowers winning medals. He was waiting for the Omani athletes, and he said, "No, Dad, that's who I'll cheer."
That's really nice to hear.
That should give you I think, a fair example of how myself and my family feel about Oman. I think in the time that I've been here, you know, from a sport perspective, the amount of development that has been happening has been fantastic. I think my team and I have evolved from having a responsibility for all of the sailing events and maritime events that we stage in Oman, and now supporting a lot of other sporting entities under the Ministry of Culture, Sport and Youth and the Oman Olympic Committee to try and take our expertise and ensure that the investment we've made in our people is there to benefit all sports in Oman. So I'm sure we'll cover off a lot of that over the next little while, but hopefully that's a good summary of my background and my feelings for Oman.
Any particular sport that you have a passionate for? Like, are you into any specific sport other than sailing? Like on a personal level. So, you know,
in a circle of trust here, sailing's not my sport. I'll struggle to tell you the front from the back of the boat. Athletics was my main sport, if I can call it that. But I think I would be easily described as a sports junkie. If there's sport on TV or if there's live sport happening, that's where you'll find me. And I think when I've travelled over the years around the world, one of the first things I'll look at when a trip is booked is what sport's happening in that place, much to my wife's disgust. But sport is, like I said, has just been a huge part of my life from a very early age, and I think athletics probably number one. But then this year with Liverpool Football Club, who are another big part of my heart. Same with His Excellency. We've spoken about this. I think a fantastic year for Liverpool, which makes us both very happy. But all sports.
Thank you, Joe. What about you, Your Excellency? Can you tell us a little bit about your background and your passion with sports? We all know you're a cricket fan, but maybe we can learn more about other sports as well.
Yeah, Alia, thank you. Sports has pretty much been part of my life growing up, from early school days to not so much in college, but did play some college cricket. And then, of course, over here in Oman, and got more involved in the weekend sports and took up tennis. Because I was sent away to school in Mumbai, which is the so-called the bastion of street cricket. Mm-hmm. I learnt my cricket playing on the streets, in the corridors, and in the hallways, and in the car parks. And as you see it in Oman on weekends and early mornings, most of the places. So I learnt it playing street cricket, and like football's played in Brazil, cricket's played in Mumbai, and got very passionate, got into it, followed teams, and then being sports inclined, you pick up and start following whether it's hockey, field hockey, or whether it's tennis. Of late, tennis has been a big passion. I play the game now more for fitness and keeping myself going. I can't be paid to go to the gym, but I have started going to the gym as well. So it's a big turnaround for me. But yeah, sports is a passion. I mean, I will follow, as Joe said, even at midnight, if I'm not getting my wink, I will watch and flick onto a sports channel any day, rather than going to Netflix or any other documentaries.
That's great. I'm looking forward for a great conversation with, two sports enthusiasts with us today. Let's kick off with a big question. What do you see as the untapped potential of sports in Oman? And maybe we can start with Joe.
We're at a point, I think we can call it a kind of a tipping point for sport in Oman, where we have to make that transition from what has largely been a voluntary driven sector of life in Oman into a modern professional infrastructure. In terms of career development for people, in terms of our physical infrastructure, in terms of our ambitions, our sporting ambitions on the field of play, in event hosting. Mm-hmm. I think we haven't. My opinion would be we haven't fully realised our potential in any of those areas. So I think it's hard to pick out one element to say that's the untapped potential. I think sport as a category in Oman. We look at the development of our tourism industry. We look at the development of our energy sector, now our manufacturing sector, our shipping and logistics with ASEAD. These are all sectors of industry that have developed considerably in Oman over the last 15 to 20 years. Mm-hmm. And sport hasn't. And I think when we look at other developing nations or developed nations, both in the region and internationally, you now have a full sports industry, from high school curriculum through to university degrees, diplomas, and big sectors of job creation that, like I said, just right now don't exist in Oman. But I think that for me is one. That's probably the biggest opportunity that I see. Is we've almost got a blank sheet of paper that we can take learnings from what other nations have done and Omanize them, for want of a better term. Mm-hmm. And I see a huge opportunity for the development of a very healthy and sustainable sports economy in Oman.
Okay. What are your thoughts, Your Excellency? I mean, sports is a big industry. It's a growing industry, not only in the region, but in the world as a whole. So what are your thoughts about sports?
Alia, if you look at what is, which are those, if you just consider which are the countries that are really prospered in sports? And I would say the countries that are passionate have really driven sports to the next level. And those countries are the Scandinavian countries, the Holland, Germany, mm-hmm. etc. And why? And because sports is a part of their culture growing up. Yeah. we don't seem to have it. So unless we do not develop our grassroots of sports culture, whether it's in schools or in the Maidans or on the beaches of Oman, unless we don't promote this vehemently from family, school, establishments, we're not going to be able to get into the real business of sports.
Yeah.
So I think what we need to do is to consciously start promoting sports at grassroots level. And that, when I say grassroots, I mean getting 3, 4, 5-year-olds to start kicking the ball.
Very interesting, Your Excellency.
And unless this doesn't happen, we will not turn around to being a sporting nation. And I believe we have the DNA of being sporting nations. I mean, can you imagine a country like Oman is probably one of the top-ranked countries in the world for beach football?
Yeah.
Why? Because we play it on the ground.
It's a passion.
Unless you don't play it, it's a passion. Unless we don't play it with a passion, it's not going to happen.
So going back to the grassroots of, emphasizing the importance of sports from an early stage, what are your thoughts about maybe having the physical education as a core topic rather than an extracurricular in schools? Any thoughts about that?
It's absolutely fundamental to include PE, physical education, sports, as part of the mainstream curriculum in schools. It has to be made mandatory, irrespective of gender, irrespective of age. As early as possible, kids have to be encouraged to go out and play. What best practices you inculcate in school remain with you throughout your life, and I believe that.
True.
Now, whether it's elocution, whether it's dramatics, whether it's debating, those skills are picked up at an early age. And sports, the earlier you start honing in on those skills, the better you will be as you turn a teen and you turn into a sporting, icon. So if we do not pick it up early, it's okay to say, yes, I now exercise by going and playing football on the beach in the evenings. Yes, but that's not, it won't drive sports.
It won't build the passion.
It will not build an economy.
But I think over and above that, following on from your comment about building an economy, I think there are now a lot of research papers done internationally about how sports contributes to individual development.
Yeah.
So, when we talk about getting children at the age of 4 and 5, kicking a football, hitting a cricket bat, a hockey stick, whatever it may be, having kind of age and stage development for people, it helps to build confidence. It helps to build, soft skills, teamwork, communication, spatial awareness. And as people develop through their lives, some of us will go on to be competitive in sport. But actually, that enjoyment of sport, if that continues, the positive impact that can have, for example, on the health system in the country is huge. And again, there's loads of reports around the more active your population is, the less of a strain there is on the health services. And, that can only be a good thing long term. And I think when you look at some of the issues that some of our neighbouring countries have had with type 2 diabetes and the onset of obesity, when we see Omanis so active, I think that's where we have done a really good job. Maybe not by design, but we've done a really good job in keeping our people active. Where that can then longer term start to stimulate economic excellence. There's about 10 years ago or so, Forbes did a survey of the Fortune 500 companies in the US and at a C-suite level, the percentages of C-suite executives in the Fortune 500 who played competitive sport through to university level. And it was a disproportionate, it was 75, 80%. I can't remember the exact figure, but it was a huge percentage of board level executives in the biggest companies in the world played competitive sport through to university level. And I think, that's where we have to start to look at sport rather than it being a hobby. something to do in the evenings on a pitch of grass or a car park on the weekends. We have to look at actually, as part of a curriculum, how does it impact the other areas of personal development and of societal development?
Yeah, quite interesting. What are your thoughts on that, Your Excellency?
It's a no-brainer. I mean, sports brings about a psychological change in a growing youngster's way of life, and it inculcates a huge discipline. 1, number 2, respect for the opposition. Number 3, that wins and losses are part of life, and we've got to take them both in the same manner. Of accepts, that you accept your losses in the same way as you can accept your thing, and I believe that it also teaches you on how we work together. Team sports are a great way to teach a person on how you're not you, or you cannot be the best if you do not have a requisite team around you, and you need to accept and respect each other's skills and capabilities in equal manner. So I believe that sports really is a great leveler when it comes to growing up. It inculcates and develops a maturity beyond most other people. I believe that I often ask when I'm interviewing future candidates to work, what kind of sports do you play?
Interesting. That gives
and I like to hear that, yes, we do, first, because it's not often that you bring in a professional and he says, I have no time. I think that's the worst excuse you can give
Interesting.
yourself. So I truly believe that sports will change the complete dynamics of personal development if it is taken up passionately and if it's taken up seriously in the country.
I think it's really interesting when people get into the mindset of ambition, and what's possible, because actually very quickly and you mentioned earlier that Oman has the DNA to be successful in sport, and fundamentally agree. I think when you look at the nature of the development of Oman's population, whether it's taking going way back now to kind of the links with East Africa and the development of the DNA into Omani culture from there, there's so much potential across multiple sports, and I think very quickly Omanis can be competitive at the highest international levels. And translating that then into business and what's possible, I think could be a huge game changer for our economy. I think the networking opportunities, as His Excellency said, when you interview someone for a job and you start talking about sport, invariably they've travelled, whether that's to attend something that they enjoy, a Champions League game, a Cricket World Cup, a T20 game, whatever it might be. They've travelled. If it's from a competitive standpoint, that competitive link kind of binds you. To this day, I'll travel to places around the world, and I'll be able to get in contact with somebody who I competed against 25, 30 years ago. And there is still that bind, even though we might not see each other, once every 10 years. Yeah. And what that can then potentially unlock in terms of, diplomatic relations, foreign direct investment, sport, just there's so many positive avenues. And I think not too many negative connotations to the development of sport.
Okay. Going back to sports being a huge industry, Oman has a natural resources of infrastructure. We have great landscapes. We have coastal lines. We have, mountains for hiking. So we have certain natural assets that we can build on. How can we leverage on what we already have?
So I think the first area for focus, something we can turn on very quickly, and I think we're already doing in certain sports, is around the hosting of major events. We've had successes in sailing, we've had successes in cricket, in hockey, in hosting world-class sporting events here. Golf, yes, absolutely. We have the Tour of Oman each year, and I think as our physical infrastructure develops for sport hosting, we do have some incredible natural backdrops that we can leverage. So, mountain and trail running over the last 15 years has become a huge sport, from something that was very, very niche, probably in Central Europe and North America, has now become a global sport. You look at, the World Mountain and Trail Running Championships, or you look at the Ultra Trail Mont Blanc, and there's lots of similar events. We have the Himam event here in Dakhlia.
Yeah.
That was a sport that 10 years ago wasn't in a conversation like this. So that's how quickly things can develop. And I think the short-term focus for me would be around what can we stage here from a hosting perspective that will showcase our natural assets, because I think the value adds to that around tourism are huge. Because I think events like our Ultra Trail events, or Oman Kite Festival, which will launch this year on the south coast, what that starts to show off from a tourism perspective, and the reach it will give without a huge investment is significant. So I think short term our focus would be there, and I think what that can do then to inspire participation in sport, what it can do to hopefully unlock commercial investment in sport. I think that's what will lead then to the medium and long term development.
Yeah. Your Excellency, in terms of investment opportunities for the private sector, where are the areas for the private sector to be part of this booming economy in sports?
You don't have to look very far. I mean, look at what has happened since COVID. There's a particular sport which has really taken off, and it's not just for a particular section of society, it's not particular gender. Paddle.
Yeah, paddle.
You've seen the explosion of paddle
Yes.
in the last 5 years in Oman.
Yeah, true.
There was a time there was a paddle court coming up every week. Paddle clubs coming up. And these clubs are now addressing other fringe sports like badminton, table tennis. I've also seen an indoor tennis court now.
Okay.
So if you just look at the way it has taken off, and look, everyone in the society is embracing it. Older people, younger people,
kids, yeah.
boys, girls,
True.
men, women. And it's so heartening to see that it's become the new social event, not just in a month, but on a weekly basis and multiple times a week, that people will actually engage in a paddle tournament or in a paddle competition or a paddle game, even at 10 o'clock at night, and go on till midnight. Instead of sitting in front of a TV, and I have nothing against e-games, but I guess that playing the game rather than, just exercising your thumb and fingers is far better. I'm sorry if I'm of the old school, but I believe that has become the new thing. Now, what it shows is that you probably want to build small little youth centers in villages, in little urban, non-urban townscapes, to encourage people to participate and play in sports. I've seen the amount of advent of little football courts, or AstroTurf football courts across the country. There's this beautiful landscape photograph of an aerial photograph of a football field in Said, Berat Said. It's outstanding. It's at about 1,500 to 1,800 meters above sea level, in the middle of nowhere, and you've got this village and a big water hose, and next to it is this AstroTurf football field. Wow. So I believe Oman's got that landscape, and we need to do that. The other one, we're forgetting the big opportunity that we have is altitude sports. Sporting heroes, they train at high altitude, and they say high altitude training is the one area that sporting people strive for. We've got fantastic opportunity to build high altitude training centers, and it's not just for our own citizens, but also for global sporting tourism to happen, sporting teams to come over. I'll give you a very small example. India is cricket mad. 87% of the International Cricket Council's revenue stream comes from Indian advertisers.
Oh.
It's nonsensical.
It's massive, yeah.
In the last 2 weeks, we've had 2 state teams from India who've come and visited to play against the Oman national team, who are taking off in 2 days' time to go to America to play their World Cup qualifiers. And when the team came over here, they said, can we play 1 game short instead of playing a 5-game series over 9 days? They said, can we only play 4 days? I said, why? He said, well, we want to go to Nizwa. We've heard something about Nizwa. Yeah. The state team got onto a bus, and we said, yeah, fine. I think our team also, having played back-to-back 2 state teams, we played 9 games, and I think they need to rest before they're on the long tour to America. They went to Nizwa. They loved it. They went on a boat ride and to see the dolphins. They've never seen so many dolphins, even on video before. What has happened is that it's suddenly taken off, and every state team from India, every club team from India now wants to come and do a tour of Oman. Oh. So I think there is a lot of connect over here, and I think what we need to do is to build small grassroots. We don't need to build stadiums. We don't have the resources. Okay. Not everyone is well endowed that can go and build global stadiums. Okay. And these stadiums are, how many times can you do a World Cup, or how many times you will fill up a stadium? But what we do need is really state-of-the-art, small, practical, multi-purpose sporting youth clubs, where we actually start building the so-called culture of sports in our families, in our communities, in our towns, in our villages, and then, of course, in the vilayas. I think that needs to be inculcated. Of course, school sports is paramount.
Following on what His Excellency mentioned about high-altitude training, did we have any interest from the international sports world into Oman? Have they ever considered high training altitude in Oman?
Yeah, so we had a couple of years back, we had the performance team from British Athletics. So one of the biggest athletic federations and most successful athletics federations in the world. And they came down to kind of see what we were talking about, because we'd built a relationship with them through the hosting of the World Athletics Race Walking Championships in 2022. And when we brought them up to Jebel Akhtar, and I think fair to say, they were just desperate to sign up and relocate their high altitude camps to Oman. The learnings we took from their visits were, when they look at a camp, what they said is they look to live high and train low. So they want to spend a long time at a high altitude. Yeah. They will do their kind of longer, more endurance focused runs at that altitude. Yeah. But when they want to do their more intensive work, they need to drop down, because it's just physically not possible for them to train at that intensity at that altitude. And when we showed them the proximity to the Nizwa Sports Complex, they couldn't believe that they could go from kind of 2,400, 2,500 meters and drop down to 600 meters in the space of 30 minutes, effectively. And this blew them away. They couldn't believe it. And there wouldn't need to be a lot of investment to make that a reality. What was probably missing from the visit were running trails, marked out running trails. You've got enough land up there on Jebel Akhtar, behind His Majesty's farm, for example, where the parkland is, would be very easy to develop trails there. And using existing hotel infrastructure that's there. Again, we could turn that on very quickly, and that was their feedback, was a resurface of the track in Nizwa and the development of some trails, and actually they're ready to go. Our proximity to Europe was fantastic. They go to Flagstaff in Arizona. They go to Potchefstroom in South Africa. You're talking 13, 14 hours of flights. Never mind the road travel that then goes in. Whereas, from London, they would be flying here in just under 7 hours, and then kind of a 90-minute drive to Jebel Akhtar. So in terms of accessibility for them, in addition to what we have at altitude and the facilities that we have in close proximity at a lower altitude, it was just that, it was win-win-win for them. And I think that's something that we could unlock very quickly, and word would spread very quickly. And I think that is something that, again, we could replicate with some of our other sporting infrastructure development. So in Masana, we have a high-performance training center for the sport of sailing. And we've had the Dutch Olympic sailing team, the Swedes, the Austrians, the Danish, all coming here to train in the European winter months. And that's all money coming into the economy. So they use our performance center that Oman Sail run and operate there, but they stay in the Barcelo resort in Masana. They bring money into the economy in South of Patna, because what they see that we have developed there is a world-class sporting facility with not a huge amount of investment. And I think, we can talk about the hockey facility, the cricket facility that exists. And I think we can unlock a lot of commercial opportunities from a sports tourism perspective with our existing infrastructure. And I think that can kind of set the agenda for any further infrastructure development and learning how we generate those revenue streams linked to infrastructure development.
He just listed a few investment opportunities for the private sector. So, Your Excellency, how can we actually bring together, the private sector with these opportunities, or how can we promote these opportunities to the private sector? Maybe we need more of promotion or awareness to be spread around the community to, get more investors into the sporting arena.
There's a very interesting shift that has happened post-COVID. Right? Most things have shifted since COVID. And the one thing that has happened in the travel and tourism world is experiential travel. And by experiential travel, it's not only about seeing things, it's about doing things. People want to learn to kayak. People want to learn to fly a mechanized kite with a fan in the back. They want to learn to drive across a desert. They want to ride a camel overnight and sleep under the stars. It's on the cusp of being sporting tourism.
Yeah.
The FT weekend magazine called How to Spend It a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, came up with an article with a new jargon called aqua trekking.
Okay.
And that was founded in Oman. So it's basically trekking through the wadis, flowing with water, at some point swimming, at some point going underwater and coming out on the other side of the rock. Yeah. And then carrying on for 3, 4, 5 weeks, 3, 4, 5 hours. So I think this mix of adventure, sports, and tourism is a huge investment opportunity. So experiential travel combined with sports. There are brands of automobile manufacturers who actually want to consider whether they can make Oman one of their hubs for giving their potential and existing customers to try out and drive their vehicles, especially in the 4x4 category, because of the beautiful terrain that we have, whether it's mountainous or whether it's gravel plains to desert sands to the white soft beaches. And I think when you bring in and consider these sort of things, the private sector part and the role is tremendous.
Yeah.
It's not just only about actually investing in the sporting venue or the sporting the sports itself, but all the other fringe. I mean, from see things to sound to barriers to equipment to televising the sport. When we did the World Cup, Cricket World Cup, all done within a matter of 3 months, just the television coverage side of it, the insurance part of it was itself $3 million. The total equipment that came in to cover one game over a 7-day period was in excess of $20 million. 10 containers worth of equipment flew across the border. and was parked here, which needed to be insured, secured, etc., etc. So I'm just giving you a little anecdotal experience of what we went through. The investment doesn't come only from the infrastructure or the immediate infrastructure, but there is so much that plugs into this organizing the sport.
Whole ecosystem.
The ecosystem is where the private sector will have to come in, from logistics to equipment to the whole. Mind you, for every 22 players that play the game, there are probably 20,000 players who watch the game.
Yeah.
At a particular level, and then there's the television, the media, the broadcasting that you plug into it. So the actual game is played in a very small, minimal amount of expend, but everything else around it is where it turns into a 10, 15, 100x times.
Yeah. True. Going back to the ecosystem around a game or a tournament, can you tell us a little bit more about how do we benefit from these events and tournaments that happen in Oman, especially the international events? Like His Excellency rightly said, it's a whole ecosystem. Yeah. It's not only the game itself, but it's the logistics. So probably SMEs could be part of it. The local communities can benefit. Local businesses can benefit. Have you come across in Oman Sail hosting an international event that really benefited the local community, the local businesses? And can you share with us a story about that?
Yeah, I think, His Excellency has spoken about, the work that Oman Cricket did in 2021. And I think at that time, he and I had a discussion about how we were going to operate post-COVID or maybe even still during COVID. In 2021, Oman Sail delivered 9 international sailing events from the Barcelo Resort in Masana. Mm-hmm. Wow. And there were 3 World Championship sailing events, 3 Asian Championship sailing events, and there was the Olympic qualifier for the Tokyo Games, which had been postponed to 2021. And then we had 2 professional regattas that we stage ourselves. And to give some context, in the first kind of 12 years of Oman Sail's existence, they had hosted 3 World Sailing Championships in that entire time. And we staged 3 in 11 weeks in Masana in 2021. And what that did to us, because coming out of COVID, there were a lot of businesses which no longer existed. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of companies that had scaled down, and we had to get a little bit more creative about how we brought the venue in Masana to life. Particularly the later we got in 21, the more open life had become again. And we worked very closely with the stakeholders across government, so the governor, the SME authority in Oman, and we created I would say cultural spaces within the resort itself, because people largely couldn't get out of the resort and go and experience Rastaq or go to Nizwa or even come to Muscat. So we worked with SMEs from South Al-Batna to bring them into the resort. So people got those experiences around, making halwa or Omani breads or cooking mishkak and shua. And we brought all of that to life inside the resort to kind of try and, tease them about what they can experience when they come back. What that did, those events that we staged, the overall return to the economy in Oman was just under 4.8 times what we spent on the events was returned into the economy, and all of that was we were able to qualify and quantify all of those numbers through the supplier networks that we used. The Barcelo Hotel itself in 2021 was the only profitable hotel in the country. And that was all on the back of the hosting of sporting events. But it worked because we collaborated. We had just over 50 SMEs who were given an opportunity, and we provided them we'll call it the infrastructure on site. Mm-hmm. We gave them tents and power and lighting. And the spend with SMEs was over 110,000 Omani Rial. and they were so that's direct impact into the communities of South Albatna on the back of the staging of events there. And I think it's, for us, it's still an example that we hold up and showcase as what's possible when multiple stakeholders collaborate to try and maximise the economic and social benefits that the staging of events can have in Oman.
Okay. To wrap things up, speaking of big events, as we just recently mentioned, what are the international sports that you would love to see in Oman in the next 5 or 10 years? Maybe, Your Excellency.
1, 2, 3. How many?
Let's stick to 5.
5?
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay, so we get a good bite of this.
What I'd really like to see is 2 particular sports that maybe tennis is what I'd like to build on, because the kind of following that tennis has, it probably equates well with the kind of tourists and the viewership that we want for the brand Oman.
Okay.
It gives us that level of prestige and a particular level of sophistication that resonates well with the brand Oman. And I'd like to see a tennis tournament, whether we start with the 250 or then with the 500, and probably in 10 years' time, 7 years' time, to do a tennis 1000 as well, ATP. So these are tournaments with very huge television and media coverage. The ultimate, according to me, would be, an F1.
But how realistic is that, Your Excellency? We have Abu Dhabi, we have the Saudi, and...
Let me tell you, it's not about we competing with them. It's about we participating in the sport, because the sport is basically viewed on television.
Yeah, it is.
It's a huge fan following. And I'm not saying that it is something that we need to invest everything in day 1 or day 2 or day 3. We need to build slowly towards that gain of momentum and see how the traction is happening within the community, within the government, and of course internationally.
Yeah.
I think these are the 2 sports that I believe can definitely herald Oman, brand Oman, into a different orbit. Just bringing them here, because the F1 track is not just an F1 track. It then transcends into corporate events. It goes into community events, into particular brand marketing events, etc., etc. Most of those tracks have also hosted the biggest concerts in the world, the biggest car exhibitions in the world. And you'll be surprised how much leverage you can get out of building a track. Not all, I think less than 1 in 100 tracks are F1 qualified in the world, but there are so many tracks that attract so much participation, weekends, evenings, etc., etc. It also kind of diverts people's energy from doing what they do on roads into a
safer
more
zone.
controlled environment. And I think that's something which has been proven by the growth and popularity of Oman Automobile Association that we have. And I think, with these 2 sports, I'd like to see and put Oman on a sporting map calendar. Can we become part of a global calendar? Can we talked about this earlier. Can we have an Oman sporting calendar, which is marketed, talked about, pushed into the minds of the people?
Joe?
Good. Look, I agree, and I think when you with a lot of what His Excellency said, I think when you look at the more recent track development in F1 and what that's stimulated around it, I mean, you take Abu Dhabi and Yas Island. They built the Formula 1 track. What is Yas Island now? the Formula One track is not the only reason people go there. The Hard Rock Stadium in Miami and the circuit there, I think it's a different investment than it was 10 years ago. In terms of events I would love to see here, we definitely don't have long enough to talk about that. But if I had to pick a couple, I think the motorsports sector, or we'll call it sport with power behind it, I think is a segment that we know would appeal to Omanis and residents here. And I think that you have some really interesting concepts now in the power sport, motorsport world. One that I've been looking at recently that I think is really interesting, the E1 electric powerboat series. So, we can talk about our credentials in renewable energy sector. Yeah. It's then a really interesting kind of alignment of sport and celebrity. So you have the sporting aspect on the water, where these boats are incredibly fast. They look like something from Star Wars, so it's going to pique a lot of attention. But all of the teams are owned by huge celebrities. So you could have they had in Doha in February Will Smith with his team. We talked about tennis. Rafa Nadal owns one of the teams. Tom Brady, the former NFL quarterback. And I think that's a really interesting event that kind of is a cross-section of multiple areas that are interesting for Oman. So that would be one, if I have to put a name on one. Another one that I think would be a really, we'll call it strategic event to target, would be the Asian Youth Games. We've started to have success in Asian Games. We had a silver medal in sailing. We had a bronze medal in athletics in China last year, 18 months ago. The youth games are targeting people kind of 16, 17, 18 years of age. So we've talked earlier in the podcast about schools curriculum, about getting young people active. Well, actually, there's a really interesting target maybe for 2032. So we have time to develop those people. But more interestingly then for me is that's I would call like a trampoline effect. If we can get a big Omani team to compete in a home Asian Youth Games, they're then going to be at the perfect age for a 2040 Olympic Games. And the Asian Games in Qatar, the Asian Games in Saudi Arabia, they're all, everything is starting to come to this region, and I'm quite sure there will be an Olympic bid for 2040. And I think the Asian in the region, and I think the Asian Youth Games in 2032 is something that could benefit all of the different stakeholders across the ecosystem, from the federations to the private sector to populating any infrastructure we develop, like a sports city, an altitude centre. But it would really give a lasting legacy to sport in Oman. Yeah. And I will put my head on the block and say I think we could, with the right planning in place, win a medal at an Olympic Games by 2040.
Thank you, Your Excellency Pankaj and Joe Rafferty, for today's conversation. And we look forward to having Oman hosting the Formula One and the Asian Youth Games in the near future. That's all for today's episode of Tejarah Talks. Remember to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, this is Ali Al-Hosni signing off.
Tejarah Talks.